Hey there. We're going to talk about roles. We're going to talk about sex. We're going to talk about masculine and feminine energy. We're going to talk about why women love the bad boys. There's a reason for this. There's a very good reason for this. And this particular video is intended to start a dialogue, have a little conversation. I'm going to share with you my thoughts and my opinions as to why I think women just can't seem to get enough of those a little bit grimy, a little bit dirty, a little bit bad to them men, and why those particular energies, why that particular style of man gets under a woman's skin and, can't seem to get rid of it. So a couple of ground rules I want to put out here for context and for a container ultimately. One is that I'm going to be talking ultimately about masculine and feminine energy and the energetics of how those two things interact. Energetics inherently do not have gender. Masculine energy is not only for men, feminine energy is not only for women. All living things have a combined expression of masculine and feminine energy. And that's ultimately the perspective that I'm talking about. However, there are going to be times while I'm talking that I reference and put it in the context of a man and a woman, just for the sake of giving your brain the ability to understand, conceptualize, assimilate, take in the information. So keep that in mind, that while sometimes I might hit, he said, she said type of very human things, really at its core, I think the bigger piece that will help us be okay with a lot of the gender roles and a lot of the exchanges between men and women are if we can view it from an energetic perspective as opposed to a human anatomy perspective. So that's one piece. The other piece I want to talk about is, or I guess the other disclaimer I want to give is the fact that it doesn't have to be men and women. It just has to be a pairing of that masculine and feminine energy. It can be a heterosexual relationship. It can be a homosexual relationship. It can be a transgendered relationship. It doesn't matter. The bottom line is that there has to be a pairing of masculine and feminine energy, no matter who carries it and in what body it shows up in. That has nothing to do with it. The bottom line is that in order for things to really balance and work, there has to be a pairing and a matching of masculine and feminine energy. So you could be a man in a relationship and have the predominantly feminine energy while your girl has the masculine energy. It doesn't really matter at all. It's just that those two things come together. So that's another thing to keep in mind. While I might reference, again, a particular style of relationship, it can apply to all things. It would be ridiculous of me to try and use every single appropriate pronoun in every single possibility. Y'all are big kids. You can handle it. You can apply it for yourself or put it up against your own heart and see how it shakes out for you in your particular relationships, whatever, vibe, whatever persuasion you claim. So those are my ground rules. Those are my things. And I want to get into that concept. Why is it that women love the bad boys? Why is it that we as women proclaim feminism and we hate to be objectified and we don't want to be sexualized and all of these things, and we still want a man to take care of us, provide for us, hold it down for us, embody these very traditional elements? Now, the first thing might be, well, I don't want that. I don't actually want that. Without spending time speaking to every single person who has a potentially differing view, I'm going to kind of call bullshit on that just a little bit. Because I think at this point in the game, both roles of masculine and feminine energy have gone so far in the opposite directions and so far to the extremes that both roles are fucked up about what their role is supposed to be. There is an inherent essence to masculine energy and feminine energy. And it's interesting. I was just reading this book, actually. It's called For the Love of Men by Liz Plank. I got it for my son, actually, for Christmas. The book jacket apparently matches my shirt today. I got it for my son for Christmas, and it's For the Love of Men, A New Vision for Mindful Masculinity. And I'm reading the introduction, and one of the first things it talks about is and to be fair, I haven't gotten all the way through the book, but in the initial pieces, it's talking about how, men are not supported in their emotional prowess. They are not educated or supported on how to communicate their emotions, how to deal with their emotions, et cetera, et cetera. And she references this particular school and this particular man who I'm not going to remember. It's on page like 7 or 8, I think, in the book. And this gentleman proclaims, the pursuit of power is a universal male trait. And then he goes on to say, the pursuit of a comfortable environment is a universal female trait. So my first problem with those two statements, I don't actually really disagree too much, but the little adjustment that I want to make is the pursuit of power is a universal masculine energy trait. The pursuit of a comfortable environment is a universal feminine energy trait. And when we switch that and take it out of male, female, gender role, human body presentation, it takes a lot of the charge out of it. And the reason that it takes the charge out of it is because of what I already referenced. Energetics don't attach to gender. Energetics are the essential nature of creation. So Eastern philosophies, traditional Chinese medicine, have this really incredible approach to acknowledging the seemingly paradoxical yet completely complementary relationship between masculine and feminine energy. So yin and yang, that circular, that symbol with the black and the white and the little swirl and all the things. I could go into a lot more detail about what all of that represents individually, but the very Taoist approach that traditional Chinese medicine takes when it comes to yin and yang is that one is not bad and one is not good. They need each other in order to exist. And only when one honors the role and the representation of the other can the initial do its job, and vice versa. So it's this very cyclical, what came first, the chicken or the egg type of conversation. But the reason that matters is because really, truly, as a woman, when I can be really comfortable in my femininity and my feminine energy, and be secure in that, and be grounded in that, and be confident in that, I'm gonna be okay when a masculine energy representation rolls up in whatever you wanna say, in its very anchored masculine representation. I'm not gonna be threatened by that. And I gotta be honest with you, and I started to get into this a moment ago, like the way that, and this is just me speaking very honestly to my girls, the way that we are approaching feminism is all wrong, to be honest. I believe that we are approaching feminism from a masculine aggression. That's not our medicine, girls. Like, that's not how we do what we do. Brief sidebar. For those of you that maybe are not super educated or aware of masculine and feminine energetics, feminine energy is this, okay? It's about receiving. It's about being the vessel. It's about being still. Feminine energy is the black part in that yin and yang symbol. Feminine energy is wintertime. It's nighttime. The moon is feminine. Feminine energy is about going in. Like I said, it's about being still. It's about being, cold, not from an emotional standpoint, but cold as in wintertime where everything is kind of like stopped and frozen and just holding. Feminine energy is about holding space. And you can see that in so many ways, right? Like, for example, women are the ones that gestate and grow babies. We sit there and we literally hold life. We hold space. The gender symbol for female is a circle with almost looks like a little person with her arms out, literally just standing there holding space. What else can I come up with? I don't know. That's all I got for now. Masculine energy, on the other hand, is directed energy. And if we're going to go off of that gender symbol again, it's a circle with an arrow pointing out of it. It is directed energy. Masculine energy is the sun. Masculine energy is summertime. It's daytime. It's activity. It's heat. It's movement. It's directed. It's going somewhere. That's why that arrow is there as a representation. So feminine energy, masculine energy. It's interesting to consider too that like female anatomy, genitalia is on the inside, whereas men's is on the outside. So in any case, that is the inherent nature of masculine and feminine energy. And while it's very easy to see how that shows up in men versus women, I want to be really clear on the fact that it's not only, again, men that have masculine energy and women that have feminine energy. Every living thing, that means not just humans, but plants, animals, any aspect of nature has a combination of both. And the point is to be balanced in both. Now, here's a tricky thing about balance. Balance is not a fixed point. Balance changes and adjusts and shifts based on the circumstances, which is really important to note, because there's another thing that comes to my mind when I think about masculine energy, feminine energy. There's a lot of talk about gender equality. There was a sign in my, I think it was like my 7th grade math teacher's classroom that he had up there above the blackboard that said, blackboard, ooh, I'll let you know I'm a little bit old. Above the blackboard that said, fair is not always equal. And that caught me for a second. For a little while, I had to chew on that. I remember being like, I don't really know what that means. I'm not sure what you're getting at. Fair is not always equal. So when we talk about gender equality, we get really stuck in this like one for one thing. Men have this access, therefore women should have this access. Women have this situation, therefore men should have this situation. It's just, it becomes very literal. And the truth of the matter is that fair is not always equal. From a parenting perspective, I have 3 children. Treating them exactly equally is not appropriate. Even from a food standpoint, I have a 16-year-old, a 9-year-old, and a 5-year-old. Am I going to give my 5-year-old the same amount of food as I give an equal amount of food as my 16-year-old? No. First of all, she's 5, he's 16. He is a he, she is a she. He is a growing boy who is eating everything in my house. She is like a bird and she just picks at shit all day long. So the equality thing is not going to happen in that space. What is fair is going to depend on the situation. From an anatomical perspective, and this just gets into some of our genetics, this just gets into some of our, very primal expressions. Men have stronger upper bodies. They just do. That doesn't mean that women are not strong with our upper body. That does not mean that we cannot get as strong as maybe some men out there. This is, again, not a one-for-one thing. There's not an all or nothing situation, but generally speaking, men have greater upper body strength. And women, our strength, girls, you know it, it's in our hips and down. It's in our legs. It's in our thighs. It's in our booties. Like, that is where our strength is. And do you want to know why? It is because from an anatomic perspective, from an animalistic primal perspective, our game was having kids strapped to our back, maybe also to our front, squatting down and like foraging things, weaving baskets, building fires, like being low to the ground, which is again another representation of feminine energy. Why do you think it's called Mother Earth? Why is it not Father Earth? Why is it that for the most part, deities, it's always, Heavenly Father, or in indigenous cultures, Father Sky. We don't get jammed up Mother Sky, you know what I mean? It's because there is just this inherent knowledge that up there, out there, the spaciousness is more masculine nature, while the dense, like solid, expression of the earth, that is feminine. That is our jam. That is what we are intended to do, is be low, squat to the ground, birth children, be in relationship with our earth. Now, that does not mean, I am not saying by any means that women are only meant to be at home, taking care of babies, barefoot, pregnant, all of that shit. No, come on, man. Like, I'm a grown-ass woman. I run my own business. I have shit to say. I'm very opinionated. Like, I am as evolved as many. I will not claim to be, I don't know. I'm an open-minded lady. And I have found, for me, and with all the women that I have worked with over the years, we are evolved, we are vocal, we do have, strengths and things that have needed to come forward, that are a far cry from the 50s housewife situation. And part of our strength is our softness. That's how it works. That's what we do. It's this emotionality thing. And so that quote that I read you, where the pursuit of a comfortable environment is a universally female trait, and what I want to put in there is a universally feminine energy trait, that's because feminine energy derives its sense of presence and self and power and like value from its surroundings, from like everything that's going on. Like, are you okay? Are you okay? Are you okay? You know what I mean? And women, I mean, God, ladies, think about all the shit that we think about on a daily basis. The constant running to-do list, you know, this multitasking thing. And that's one of those really, you know, small, maybe like trite examples of how we're like, women can do 18 things at once, and people are like, oh, men have one-track minds. I don't think that's necessarily true. Those are two very extreme statements, but they hint at a natural existence, an inherent wisdom, an inherent strength, an inherent skill set. Let's call it that, an inherent skill set. And that speaks to comfortable environment, kind of holding it down at the fort while the men of the tribe are out fucking slaying saber-toothed tigers or whatever the hell needed to be done. Again, we're not living in that same way, but we still have those energetics inherently within our existence. To go back to the masculine energy, the pursuit of power is a universally male trait, is what he wrote. But again, I want to add in there, universally masculine energy trait. So ladies, when we want to pursue our power, that is us stepping into our masculine energy and flexing that strength. Now, and this is where we get into that feminism thing, with all of this gender equality thing that we're shooting for, absolutely, we can pursue our power. Absolutely. That is the right of any living creature on this planet. What I want us to consider is how we go about doing that, how we go about cultivating and understanding our power. And so my question to you, as a man or as a woman, or whatever it is that you identify as, what is your power? How do you feel the most powerful? When do you feel the most powerful? How does that show up? And to be fair, I bet you it's going to take some work to answer that question, because it takes work to decalcify the conditioning that has gone on in our society, and really understand what it means to be powerful. You know, power is not just dominance. It's not just aggression, especially for women. And I will speak for myself in this moment. A lot of times my power comes from not saying a goddamn thing at all. There's something that people talk about, right? Like the mom look. When you look at your kids and you got a whole bunch of shit to say and all you have to do is give them a certain look and they know not to fuck around anymore, that's a feminine energy power. We just hold a certain space, right? Yeah, that's what I got on that. It's interesting to kind of push it back over to the masculine energy side for a little while, because again, this book, For the Love of Men, A New Vision of Mindful Masculinity, it's talking again about men having a hard time, not being taught, not being able to cultivate their emotions, not having a lot of emotional intelligence, that's put more on the female standpoint. And I agree with that for sure. I think that there's a lot of ways in which we have done our sons a disservice by not teaching them emotional, IQ, what is that, EQ, emotional quotient, emotional intelligence. We have done them a huge disservice, absolutely. I also want to say, though, that I want my man to be my man. I don't want my man to be my girlfriend. I have plenty of girlfriends. We talk a lot of shit. We use a lot of words. We get real emotional and real watery. And while I want a partner who can go there with me when we need to, I want my man to be my man, not my homegirl. And so what that looks like in a very real-time example is that I want to acknowledge the fact that I think we ask a lot of our men. We ask a lot of them. We want them to be emotionally available. But we also want them to be like real strong, and we want to be able to depend on them. We want them to sort of understand our constantly moving ebbs and flows of emotions. For anyone out there who has not read the book, The Way of the Superior Man, I highly suggest it. It's by David Data. I will tell you, it's extremely triggering, or let me rephrase that. It can be very triggering because it will call into question your relationship with both your masculine and your feminine energy for both men and women. I realize that this book was, I think, intended for men, but I think it's extremely important for women to read as well, because to be fair, there's a lot of ways in which he gets it. David Deida, the way he writes these things, he gets it, because from an inherent masculine and feminine energy perspective, masculine energy anchors the feminine. And what I mean by that is there's a way in which our unbelievable, multifaceted, what is the word that I just used? Multitasking approach can get overwhelming. And we need that masculine energy to like direct our shit, because otherwise we can get real wild. We can get real wild. And there's nothing wrong with that, because wildness has its own power as well. But it feels safer for feminine energy when there is a sense of containment. Masculine energy provides that containment, because again, if masculine energy is directed energy, it takes all of this wildness, this ocean of feminine energy that we are, where we're like a tempest and we're a storm and we're a tsunami and all these things, and it like is like, yo, babe, we're going here, we're doing this, focus. And that's really helpful for feminine energy. It's very, very helpful for feminine energy. This brings us to that point of, why do women love the bad boys? Because it is a nod to that unequivocal desire that feminine energy has to be directed somewhere. And that brings into play the relationship between the yin and the yang, the masculine and the feminine. If feminine energy is just constantly moving and going on all these places, nothing is ever going to get done. So we have to employ masculine energy to direct our shit somewhere. That can be done on your own. I am my own woman. I have to cultivate my feminine energy and then put it towards something. You know, I run a business. I have all these ideas. I need to take all these ideas and put it towards something. In a relationship, and we're talking like unspoken energetics, the mere presence of a strong masculine existence just grounds my shit. It lets me actually relax, because my feminine energy can like bump up against the boundaries. So when we're talking about why do women love the bad boys, it's because in a very overt, very dominating, very aggressive at times way, it calms our shit down. It gives us our boundary. It gives us our container. And there's something very, again, primal and innate that we love about that shit. Now, that being said, I, among many other women, I'm sure, have been in a plethora of unhealthy relationships with someone who would embody that, but then also not be able to honor our wisdom and our softness and our power and respect that. So they're, again, very human manifestations of these things. And it always comes back to, having to do your own inner work, childhood traumas, mommy issues, daddy issues, all of that shit. Absolutely. All those things have a role to play. But what I'm talking about here is the very subtle energetics that go on between men and women. And in particular, like I said, this like bad boy complex. Why do we love it? Because it feels good. It feels good for us to be directed and held and like thrown around a little bit and like dominated. And I don't mean dominated as in like disrespect, but I want to talk a little bit about that for a second. Actually, it's making me think of something. In dominant and submissive relationships, if we're talking about like BDSM, in a very ethically run dominant and submissive relationship, the dominant is only a dom if he, and again, we're just using this for, hypothetical, because we're talking about men and women, masculine, feminine energy. The dominant is only a dom if he has a submissive that will submit to him. So really, who's in charge there? Is it the dom or is it the submissive that says, okay, you can be in charge? And again, in a very ethical, submissive and dominant relationship, there would be safe words, there are agreements, there's an understanding that we're gonna go to a certain point, but when I say no, and I'm talking about the submissive here, when the submissive says, nope, this is my boundary, that dom is all done. So again, I ask you, who's really in charge? And it's a nod to how we can only be one if we have the other. Masculine energy is fulfilled when there is a sense of, I can protect you, I can nurture you, I can provide for you, I can hold your shit down. But if he, again, hypothetically, doesn't have anyone to provide for, what the fuck is he doing with his masculine energy? You know? So we need them, they need us. It's a dance of understanding, this is my inherent nature, this is your inherent nature. And when I can allow you to be inherently who you are, and you are comfortable in that, you are able to then allow me to be inherently who I am, there's a very copacetic thing that happens. You know, I prefer traditional roles in a sense, not always, but in a sense. And I think that in a lot of ways, there are a lot of women who do prefer that. We have just been conditioned and told that we have to like prove a point and like draw lines in the sand and like, you know, buck up and like show our masculine energy in order to prove that we are equal. And again, we are equal, but just not in the same ways. It's not a one-for-one thing. There's another quote in this book that says, toxic masculinity turns men into a threat to women. And that's true. This is very true. Absolutely. When we're talking about domestic violence, when we're talking about rapes, assaults, absolutely. Again, I am not denying any of the horrific things that have gone on in that capacity, in that toxic masculinity exchange. However, I made a post a little bit ago about toxic femininity, because that is a thing too. And it's interesting because while the book says toxic masculinity turns men into a threat to women, toxic masculinity turns women into a threat to men. And this is why. If you have a male who is quote unquote toxically masculine, meaning not really in touch with his emotions, maybe he's got some wounding, you know, doesn't have a language to speak to those things, feels like he has to be this constant, like I said, dominant, aggressive thing. When there's a female who shows up who's soft and grounded in her femininity, that is going to trigger the shit out of him. That is going to make him feel like he is threatened, like his fight or flight instincts, his survival is at risk. Because that's what's happening when we're triggered, is our limbic system is telling us that we are not safe. This is not a safe situation. You know, there's always all this stuff about, you know, daddy issues for women. Mommy issues for men are a thing as well. And it's not always about the relationship with the mom. You know, it is this culture and how we teach our boys and our men and how we, you know, groom them and bring them up. But toxic masculinity makes women a threat to men just as much, because all of a sudden they are being reflected back this softness, this vulnerability, this emotional languaging that they don't know how to they don't know what to do with that. They don't know how to exist in that space. They all of a sudden feel like off their rocker and not sure how to show up and how to match that. So they feel threatened. And then, you know, who knows what goes on after that point. But I just think it's an interesting exchange. It's not all one way, in my opinion. There's a lot of talk out there about the patriarchy, smash the patriarchy, down with patriarchy. Yeah, for sure. Agreed. Particularly, you know, white men have really fucked up some shit for our world in a lot of ways. And I'm curious if there's such a thing as righteous patriarchy. And when you look up those individual words, the term righteous just means like justified, virtuous, like good-willed, virtuous, like it's good, it's solid. That's not a word. Solid. Righteousness, okay. And then patriarchy. There are a few definitions, but one of the very simple definitions is just like the male lineage, like the male expression. Patriarchy is just like, hey, this is led and designed, this is the male line. So if we have a righteous patriarchy, meaning a virtuous use of the male lineage, what's so wrong with that? When we acknowledge the fact that, hey, you've got more upper body strength than you. Can you please take care of this? Perfect. What's the harm in that? That doesn't mean that I'm not as strong as you. It just means that my strength is different than yours. That's all. You know, there's a really interesting invitation here for us as women, for men, for our energetics. I invite all of you to look up more information about yin and yang, about masculine and feminine energy. If you have questions, if you want to know more, I teach on this all the time. I work with this, work on this with clients all the time. And, you know, I'm happy to offer more support and guidance. I suggest this book to read. I suggest Way of the Superior Man to read. I suggest this book to read, Mary Magdalene Revealed. This has a lot of really good, juicy, feminine power in here. Shakti Woman by Vicki Noble. There's lots of incredible literature out there that will challenge and expand your definitions around the role of masculine and feminine energy and how they inherently are intended to exist and interact with each other, as opposed to what it is that we have created, at least in the Americas. Obviously, I'm an American woman. I don't know as much about other cultures, but I've lived here and I've grown up here and I've seen a lot of this. And, you know, I've seen a lot of women and I've worked with a lot of women, and I am a woman who wants more from her men, and I want more from myself. And I want it in a way that is righteous, in a way that is virtuous, in a way that is in alignment with who I inherently am. Because I have spent many a time, many a year, many a relationship, many an interaction trying to like play the game and be powerful by being masculine. And there are times where my directed energy, where my masculine energy comes forward, for sure. What I have found the sweet spot to be, though, is I will be masculine when I need to say whatever words I need to say. And until that moment, I'm going to be feminine, and I'm going to gestate, and I'm going to cultivate, and I'm going to be soft, because my strength is in my softness, because I identify primarily as a female and with my feminine energy. So I'm just going to stick with that. And I'm going to look to my ancestry. I'm going to look to my past. I'm going to look to my history and see which parts still work and which parts are okay for me to take on. Just because we don't like all of the 50s housewife stuff doesn't mean we need to get rid of all of it. You know, things aren't always mutually exclusive. Just because some things are bad doesn't negate the good parts. And just because there are good parts doesn't mean we have to ignore the bad parts, right? Like, this is not a black and white sort of a blanket statement existence that we have. It's very subtle. It's very nuanced. And I would be curious to know anyone else's thoughts around this relationship between masculine and feminine, this relationship between, you know, receiving or submission and domination, between why us women, or not between, but about why us women love the bad boys. Because while stereotypes are stereotypes and they're blanket statements, there are some interesting truths that can be extrapolated and dissected and conversated about, and it leads to some really interesting insight. So let me know your thoughts. Let me know if you have questions. I'm always open to dialogue, and one of the things that my girlfriends and I say all the time, there's always an asterisk, because, you know, things change all the time. We learn more, we talk more, we expand. So opinions and things change all the time, and I'm all about that. I'm all about expanding our definitions. So I love you all very much.